So let's check back on our water. I will check on this water first. So we skipped talking about this. Eventually we will need to sparge our grain. So once the mash is done, this is about 2.5 gallons of water. We'll pour this through the grain to wash out all of the good juicy sugars. So we got this warming up to about 170 Fahrenheit. That'll be a nice slow warm. The little coil underneath this giant pot takes a lot longer to heat things up to temperature than this puppy does. So we've made an adjustment, which you probably can't read, but I can. So we turn the temperature up to 160 because when we pour 10 pounds of grain into all of this water, the grain is all room temperature and it's going to drop the temperature of the water by a bunch. So starting your mash about 10 degrees hotter than you mean it to be will end up with the temperature being where you intended the mash to be. So first thing first, we're going to turn the temperature back down. So we'll do our mash at 150. You'll see it's already doing a little bit of that condensation. Now, we can do this in whichever order we would like, but paddle in first is not necessarily bad. So we're going to take our 10 pounds of grain, and this is where you got to be careful because when your 10 pounds of grain end up on the ground, you're going to be real sad. So handle your grain very carefully. I tend to hold the bag here to prevent any slippage and then start pouring. So you'll see in here, if our camera person can get us a nice view, that the grain tends to form a little island. And it's very easy for us to form dough balls this way so that you get little clusters of grain that are not wet because they're bound up in a pile of other wet grain. So it's usually a good idea to give this a stir as you're going along. Smells great, actually.
It really does.
I had been a little nervous about our 3 gallons of water being not quite enough for my 10 pounds of grain, but it looks like this will work out just fine. As you can see, the top is still dry, so we gotta get it all mixed in, but we're getting a nice oatmeal kind of texture here. And this is where I usually evaluate how the grain is looking. It's a little mucky at the top. It's not too dry. You can kind of see it's like a little porridgey with just enough water that it's standing ever so thin on top of it, which I feel comfortable with. So we're going to put a cap on this and mash for an hour and see what happens. So we've got about 15 minutes into this process. So just to make sure that everything is evenly heated and evenly stirred, we're gonna give this a stir. Now, you might particularly notice that there's a internal little dead space between my bucket and my heater. So one of the things that I have to make sure is that the water from that space also stirs into this. So I will need the camera to back up because we're gonna let this drain for a moment. And then drop the bucket back in. So that allows the water that's in the grain to mix with the water that is sitting outside. Give this a stir. We'll probably repeat that one more time. Now, of course, you have to be careful. I have hot hands, so I can deal with this, but this handle is hot enough that if you're not used to handling hot things, it might be uncomfortable. There have been times where I definitely had to use a cloth. You can't quite see that the inside bucket is floating right now. Occasionally mistakes happen. There's a little bit of grain here that got flicked. That's okay. We made sure that the water level restabilizes so that the outside and inside waters are about at the same level. It may take a minute just because the water has to flow through the entire grain bed. But there we go, and then we'll cap it up and keep mashing. Here we go, round two. We're gonna do the same thing. Give this a bit of a mucking. Then let it drain out and hopefully I'll splash it everywhere. Slosh things around in there. Make sure that the water mixes.
You can actually see on camera a bit of the water at the side.
Oh, that's good. And then we'll give this a stir. Make sure that the water gets back into the grain. And then, because I believe anything worth doing once is worth doing twice. Actually, I believe anything worth doing once is worth doing 3 times, but and then we wait. So here we go. This is a moment of truth. Before we consider the mash to be done, we got to make sure that we managed to actually successfully extract sugars. Now, the recipe I'm following is terrible. And since the recipe I'm following is terrible, they didn't actually give me an original gravity. But a rough estimation should be 1.04 to 1.05. Although, in this particular case, we're looking at very hot wort relative to room temperature, so there's liable to be a large discrepancy in density because of the temperature difference, but we're gonna check.
Oh, how cool is that? You've got a spigot on the side.
So without even any stirring or agitation or whatever, I'm at 1.042 or 1.044, which means that whatever is in the grain itself has got to be higher. This is actually higher, and although we're going to wash it, given the amount of grain I was using, that sounds like a completely reasonable gravity. I would hate for anything to go to waste, so guess where this is going? Whee! Right back in the bucket.